Well, last time we were talking about all the problems that can be caused by tobacco, and as you can see, it affects a lot of different areas of your body. Oh, well, he's got it. That's okay. A lot of different areas of your body, including your reproductive organs if you're a female. Not so much if you're a male, of course. Recent polls showed that of graduating seniors, 42.2% had tried tobacco, and 10.7% were reported smoking every day. I guess if you're going to smoke, you might as well smoke every day. Often the deciding factor in adolescent smoking is whether the parents or the teens smoke. So if your parents smoke, then you're more likely to smoke as well. However, if they smoke and then they quit before you make it to the third grade, you're still less likely to find it acceptable behavior. Therefore, you're less likely to smoke if your parents have given it up by the time you're in the third grade. Because children are young and their brains are not fully developed, peer influence and identity formation are key factors in tobacco experimentation. Just as adolescents identify with those they socialize with, particular behaviors can become internalized as personality identifiers throughout their life. You may identify yourself as a nerd or an athlete or a stoner or a brainiac, whatever, but however you reacted in high school is probably the way you're going to react for the rest of your life, which gets a little bit confusing. You can take in all four of these if you want. I mean, all four personality attributes, if you like. Most people don't. They usually identify with one or the other. Once again, because of the immature adolescent brain, teens are more susceptible to the addictive properties of tobacco than people who wait until they're 21 to try the substance. I had a friend who his father told him if he didn't start smoking until he was 21, he would give him $10,000, and he did. And of course, the guy he didn't really care to smoke because he didn't try it before he was 21. Thus, adolescents who start smoking are more likely to become regular smokers. Most people do start smoking in adolescence. They don't start smoking as young adults. They don't start smoking in their 30s or 40s or 50s. They start smoking when they're children. Diet is second only to tobacco as a carcinogen. 1/3 of all cancer deaths are attributed to poor diet choices. And some of those choices have to do with the types of food that you eat, how the food is prepared. When I was living in Mississippi, they used to say that it isn't deep fat fried food. It's not whether the food is fried, it's whether it's deep fat fried. So everything in Mississippi, they wanted it to be deep fat fried, which meant that the grease was cooked into the substance, whatever it might happen to have been. I know, Michelle stole your chair. It looks like we're losing chairs. I don't understand what's going on. Oh well. If that one's not okay, we can find you another one. I'm going to steal from somebody else. That's kind of cool. So it's how it's prepared, the size of the portions. Some places, if you eat at a restaurant, they give you this huge platter full of food, a little bit more than most people need to eat. Whether the diet is balanced, whether you have a vegetable, a starch, and a protein on the plate, and of course how many calories you're taking in. Cancer is more prevalent among people who are malnourished and who consume high levels of fats, who consume certain food additives such as nitrates from processed meat. That means that sausage and hot dogs. Hot dog is actually a sausage. Not really very good for you. The jerky, not really very good for you, especially if it's processed instead of just dried. Usually it is processed, so yeah, okay. Jerky's not very good for you. It's got too many nitrates in it. Alcohol, of course, is also a carcinogen. Diet can reduce the possibility of cancer, reducing intake of foods and drinks that promote weight gain, reducing the number of saturated fats, not drinking sugary drinks. And sugary drinks by themselves are not really carcinogenic, What is carcinogenic is the fact that you gain too much weight. If you do gain weight, of course, then that makes you more susceptible to cancers. You should eat primarily plant-based foods. Limit your intake of red meat and avoid processed meats, of course. That's all your sausages. Limit consumption and lunch meat. Lunch meat is processed meat as well. Limit consumption of alcoholic beverages. Reduce intake of salt and moldy grains or legumes. And I was reading about moldy grains. It seems like an odd thing to talk about, moldy grains, but the reality is that if a grain is stored, then it probably has mold. What was I reading? According to this one article that I read, the moldiest grain you can eat is corn, no matter how it's cooked, because corn is stored. It's not, unless you eat fresh off the ear. And even then, it's still moldy. It's got a lot of sugar in it, and because it's got a lot of sugar in it, it supports a lot of mold. So if you eat sweet corn right off the stalk, I guess you're probably okay. But if it's canned corn, any other kind of corn, you're probably getting a lot of mold as well. Mold contains mycotoxins, and mycotoxins are carcinogenic. Wheat also is stored, and if it is stored, of course, it probably has the mold. Nuts are stored. If they're stored, yeah, we've got a problem. They said that the worst nut you can eat is peanuts, because they sit on top of the ground. It gets wet, it gets dry, it gets wet, it gets dry, and it is it's got a lot of substances in it. It's got a lot of nutrients in it, and mold likes nutrients just as much as you do. So moldy grains, really kind of interesting. I'd never even thought of it before. Being a farmer, being a wheat farmer and a soybean farmer, soybeans are clean, but wheat isn't. Being a wheat farmer and also being a soybean farmer, I was a little surprised that they even talked about moldy grains being a problem. And maybe the biggest problem we have in the United States, I don't know. But I guess they'll have to do more research on it. Possible food links to certain cancers are those that affect the cells that line bodily tissues, including those in the lungs, the colon, the bladder, the stomach, and the rectum. These are all epithelial cells. To a lesser degree, the uterus, the prostate, the breasts, and the kidneys are all susceptible to food-borne carcinogens. Soy foods contain isoflavones, which can act as estrogens in the body, and these are known as phytoestrogens. So if you drink soy milk and you're a guy, then potentially one of the things that may happen to you is that you'll get more estrogens than your body really wants, in which case you may grow body parts that you don't want. Your breasts may be enhanced by the estrogens, which is always cute. It may shrink your testicles, as it were, if you're a female, of course. The problem with being a female is that, you're getting estrogens, and your body has tons of estrogens already. If you're getting a hyperdosage of estrogens, it can become carcinogenic. As I told you before, when they first invented the birth control pill, it was heavy doses of estrogens. And one of the side effects of the birth control pills was cancer. They saw a lot of cancer. They also saw a lot of women that would go blind because of the heavy doses of estrogen. It can cause breast cancer, and of course this is one of the problems with birth control pills anyway. One of the side effects can potentially be breast cancer. So it's one of the things that they talk about. Women after they go through menopause, of course, they're not taking birth control pills anymore. But one of the problems is that they can go on estrogen replacement therapy. The reason that all women don't go on estrogen replacement therapy is because they're more susceptible to breast cancer. And it's the reason that we're not hitting people with heavy doses of estrogens. But if you're taking in soybeans or soy one way or the other, then potentially what you're doing is taking in more estrogens than you really need. There are foods that do fight cancers. Carotenoids are light-absorbing pigments that give vegetables their color. It's what makes the carrots orange, the tomatoes red, or whatever color you may happen to have. Pumpkins orange as well, broccoli green, cauliflower white, Brussels sprouts red, or green, I'm sorry, citrus fruits, whatever color they happen to be, yellow or orange or whatever, and strawberries red. I had strawberries for lunch today. It was kind of interesting. Carotenoids are rich in antioxidants, especially beta-carotene, which is a good source of vitamin A. The beta-carotene is kind of cool. It makes your urine bright yellow or bright orange, depending on how much you take in, which is always fun. I mean, urine is so boring, isn't it? I mean, it's always clear, right? It's kind of a little bit yellow. But if you take in these guys, well, it makes your urine a different color. Once upon a time in a land far, far away, this is back in the 70s, people were taking things to make their urine a different color. I know, it seems like a stupid thing to do, but you could go to a, you could go to a health food store and they would give you a dye to put in your urine. I mean, to put in your, to eat so that you would, your urine would be a funny color. Now, I know this is, irritatingly I know this because when I was in the service, one of my jobs was collecting drug urines from people. And by God, some of these individuals would run to the health food store and buy a green one or a blue one so that their urine would be blue or green. It didn't mask anything. I guess they thought maybe it did, but the reality was that it didn't. But this stuff really colors your urine, which is always exciting when you urinate something other than clear liquid or whatever. The other cancer-fighting foods, protective foods, garlic, onions, and leeks. They protect you from breast and stomach cancer. Selenium-rich foods, fish, liver, garlic, eggs, whole grains. They protect males against prostate cancer. Flavonoids, red wine, grapes, apples, cranberries. I had 2 apples for lunch. It reduces the risk of lung and colorectal cancer. One reason is because it is a, what's the word I'm looking for? Roughage. It's roughage. And so it shoots it moves the waste product through your digestive tract faster, better, with less problems. Lycopene, we see lycopene, anything that's red, tomatoes, red peppers, and watermelon contains antioxidants, and it aids in cognition. So these tomatoes, red peppers, and watermelon actually make you smart. So if you're going to take a test, you might try eating watermelon the day before, just a thought, or maybe, chomp down on a tomato. I don't know what the red peppers part. Indoles, cruciferous vegetables, reduce the risk of several forms of cancer. So anything like cabbage or cauliflower or Brussels sprouts or broccoli, those are all your crucifers. And they will help you fight off different cancers. Excessive drinking is a major risk factor for cancer of the upper respiratory and digestive tracts. Excessive drinking may also contribute to breast, colorectal, and liver cancer. One of the things we do know is that if we go to Japan, where they drink a lot, where they don't process alcohol as well as we do in the United States, as well as Europeans do. Europeans are the best. They are the best. They process alcohol so much better than everybody else. They're like professional alcohol processors. That's the way it works. But if you go to Japan and they have some missing enzymes in their stomach that help digest the alcohol, this is the cancer of the digestive tract. Kills them more frequently than anything else. If they get, whereas we die of cirrhosis of the liver, people in the United States die of cirrhosis of the liver. They die of stomach cancer from the alcohol that they drink. because they can't process it as well. So it sits on their stomach much longer than it does anybody else. So it's really kind of a sad situation. They don't die of lung cancer, they die of stomach cancer, which is kind of weird. Consuming 2 or more alcoholic drinks per day creates at least 25% greater risk of breast cancer in women. So not only does it make you drunk and stupid, but it also increases your risk of having breast cancer. Animal research shows that drinking the equivalent of 2 to 4 drinks per day increases the growth of an existing tumor. So if you've already got cancer, the last thing you want to do is drink alcohol. It's the last thing you want to do. Lack of physical activity may be a risk factor for colon cancer in both men and women. Any idea why? Well, we're dealing with the colon. This is the last step in your digestive process. This is where your solid waste has to be processed through this area in order for it to become feces so that you can get rid of it. So why would exercise help you? What does exercise do for you? You ever get constipated? Well, why is taking a walk probably the best thing that you can do? That and drink a water.
Speeds up your metabolism.
I'm sorry?
Speeds up your
It
metabolism.
does speed up your metabolism. That's not going to make it.
Callus.
It's not going to make it.
Digestive system.
It helps break down the fluids.
Well, it does. Yeah, it does all kinds of interesting things. It does all these positive things, but the best thing that it does, it gets things moving. Okay, and that's what you're trying to do. It's sitting here, and you want it to move over here. Yeah.
That's a passive.
Yeah, exactly. So, regular exercise is a really good idea. Regular exercise, whether work-related or recreational, may protect women from breast cancer. The thing that actually protects women from breast cancer more than anything else, of course, is estrogen, unless you don't need it anymore. And then that's the reason they don't like to put women on estrogen replacement therapy. It's not. They tried that for a while, and what they discovered was that they were giving women breast cancer, and they really didn't like doing that. 7 hours or more of exercise a week makes breast cancer 20% less likely. Walking works as well as more strenuous exercise, so you don't have to do something tough. You don't have to do something hard. Just go out and do it. Just go out and walk. Physically active women have lower rates of breast cancer than do sedentary women, and that is a good thing. Being overweight and obese increases risk of cancer in the endometrium, the colon, the kidneys, the esophagus, the pancreas, the ovaries, and the gallbladder. In 2012, the CDC reported that 34% of U.S. adults are overweight and 35.9% of these individuals are obese. Exact causal mechanisms are not quite known, but we do know that if you are overweight, you're more likely to get breast cancer. You're more likely to get just about any kind of cancer. Now, the sad thing is that it wasn't very long ago that we didn't see that many overweight people. If we saw somebody that was grossly obese, then it was a surprise. But now they're everywhere. They're everywhere. People are just gaining weight for no reason whatsoever. And I'd like to blame Sheldon, but I don't think I can blame this one on Sheldon.
Why not?
Because you're not making everybody overweight. Yeah, back in the 60s and 70s, if you watch an old movie or watch a television show from the 60s and 70s, you never saw anybody that was overweight. But now, I mean, they're all over the place. They're just everywhere. They're everywhere. I was watching a movie the other night that was made in 1940, and they called this lady the Little Mountain because she was so fat. Well, geez, she's not nearly as fat as half the people you see over at Bosch's. It's just really kind of shocking. I'm not picking on American Indians. I apologize, but I'm not really picking on American Indians. You see fat people all over the place. I mean, they're just everywhere. They're everywhere. All races have a problem with being overweight these days. We came back from, we were down in Peru in 2003 on a Fulbright trip, and we were in Peru, and those people are skinny. I mean, well, not skinny, but they're not I didn't see the first overweight person there. And then we went to Guatemala, and we still didn't see any fat people. And then we came home. We had to stay, we flew into Los Angeles and we had to stay that night in Los Angeles. We got out of the, we were walking around the motel and my God, every person in that motel was just as big as a bar. They were just huge, as ridiculous as that sounds. Yeah, this is in 2003. This is really kind of tragic. We're gaining too much weight because the food that we eat is crap. Did I say crap? Can I say crap? I don't really mean feces. I was already talking about feces before. I don't want you to get confused. Postmenopausal obese women have a 1.5 times higher risk of cancer than their normal weight sisters. I'm almost 70 years old. One of the things that I've always wanted to do is have a chest that stuck out farther than my stomach. That's what I want. None of my brothers have. Their guts are just out there, even though it's like they've all got beer bellies except they don't drink. So I work on my chest when I go over to the gym so that my chest is as big as it can possibly be. I mean, it can only get so big. I'm not too bad sure. I don't. My gut kind of sticks out right here, but that's a scar. I got a scar that sticks out. Anyway, but her stomach sticks out farther than her breasts do, which is really kind of a tragedy if you think about it. Being overweight as you wander into middle age increases your risk of early mortality 20 to 40%. So this is something that can actually kill you, and it's something that we need to be aware of. 95% of breast cancer cases are non-genetic or due to other risk factors such as obesity. Menarche at a young age is a risk factor for breast cancer. Lack of exercise, smoking, poor diet, use of oral contraceptives, the presence of other diseases of the breast, radiation exposure, use of alcohol. I went, as you all know, I went to my 50th reunion. We had a couple ladies in our class that who matured very early, relatively early, and were relatively chesty. None of those ladies have their breasts anymore. They've all had double mastectomies. They all had breast cancer that had to be cut out. As odd as that seems, these were everybody's fantasy women because they had breasts in the 4th grade or the 5th grade or whatever. But none of them have their breasts anymore, which is kind of a tragedy. Of course, how old are we? One of them was dead. How old were we? 67? 68? And there was only one of them that was dead, but there were 3 or 4 others that they all had the mastectomies, and they all sat around and talked about it. It was really kind of an interesting conversation that I wasn't really part of since I still have my chest. As confusing as that. Oh no, what have I done? Radiation exposure, of course, is another thing that can cause, like a menarche at a young age, lack of exercise, smoking, poor diet, use of oral contraceptives, of course, as we've said before, birth control pills, especially the old birth control pills, cause breast cancer. The presence of other diseases of the breast, of course. My second wife had, what do they call it? She had lumps in her breast. What do they call that? Cysts. She had cysts in her breast. They were lumps. Radiation exposure, use of alcohol. The last time I talked to her, she still had her breasts. So I'm not sure what's going to happen to her. But she was young. She was in her 20s, and she started having these lumps in her breast. And while I was married to her, she had a lumpectomy. So, and we were afraid they were going to take her breast. She was afraid they were going to take her breast. I didn't care. Families with inherited breast cancer show breast cancer in 2 or more close relatives. Early onset, breast cancer in more than 1 generation. Cancer in both breasts for 1 or more family members. Frequent ovarian cancer. Ashkenazi Jews, interestingly enough. Ashkenazi Jews are Jewish people from Eastern and Central Europe with a family history of breast and or ovarian cancer. So the Ashkenazi Jews, this is very common. Other cancers that have strong genetic connection, basal cell carcinoma. It's common localized skin cancer. As you can see, this is what a basal cell carcinoma is. I'm not sure if we see this in your population, but we see this a lot in my population. My poor mother probably had 10 or 15 of them chopped off her face. Make it sound like they were using an axe, but they were using a scalpel. My poor mother. And I've had 3 cut off of me. One on my forehead, one on my cheek, and one on my upper chest. Ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, laryngeal cancer, these are all common cancers that have a genetic factor. Various chemicals are clearly carcinogenic. No subfield of cancer has identified as many new toxins as the asbestos. We know that asbestos causes mesothelioma, which is a cancer of the lungs. Mesothelioma we see a lot in Montana, and the reason is because that's where all the asbestos came from, up in the mountains in Montana. So a lot of people that worked mining the asbestos, all those people are dead. They died of mesothelioma. We used to put it in our ships, especially our military ships, and those individuals that were ship builders back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, they also had mesothelioma. One of the things that happened, especially with people up north, I don't know if it happened as much down here, they had what they called relocation, where they went onto the reservation and they pulled off the best and the brightest, and they sent them out to California to work in shipyards and all over the place. This was during the Eisenhower administration. They were moving people off the reservation. I had a good friend, you know John R. Michelle, you know John R. Don't you?
What's the last one?
Strike.
Oh, yeah, I've never
Yeah, he was a welder out in the shipyards in Oakland, and I didn't know how he stayed away from all the cancers that people were dying from. But he used to live in a community of people from Fort Belknap, and a lot of them came down with cancers because of working in the shipyards. So that's asbestos, vinyl chloride, of course. Arsenic is rat poison. It's also used in gold leaching, and of course the arsenic has gotten into the water supply at Fort Belknap because of that. Some researchers believe that household cleaners that contain chlorine may be carcinogenic. Pest control products may increase the risk of breast cancer. They're offering to eradicate all the pests in my house. They're going to spray my house, but I figure, what the hell, I can live with spiders. I don't need my spiders killed. Whatever they're trying to kill. I got a cat and a dog, and they both play with all the insects that they find. So the cat eats the mice and plays with all the spiders, so I'm not worried about it. Environmental toxins in the air, soil, and water contribute to an estimated 2% of fatal cancers. Bladder cancer, lung cancer. Municipalities will treat their drinking water with chlorine to curb cholera and typhoid fever outbreaks. So there's chlorine in the water, which tastes like Clorox. I know, it's delightful. They will also fluoridate their water to prevent tooth decay, and of course both of these may increase the danger of bladder cancer. I was running a marathon or half marathon in Indianapolis. They kept giving us cups of water, and I couldn't stand the water. It was like drinking Clorox. It was that strong. And of course, people in Indianapolis are going, "No, this is okay. This is fine. We drink this stuff all the time," and I can't imagine drinking water that tastes like Clorox. I swear, it was horrible. And I had to run for 13.1 miles. It was terrible. Anyway, I finished the race. Eventually, I finished the race. Broke 2 hours, so I was really happy. And I didn't drink any Clorox water. And after I got done, I drank bottled water, but I wouldn't drink any of their water. Oh God, it tastes so horrible. One of the dangers of being white, and there are dangers of being white. One of them is skin cancer, and of course you can see how red this guy turns. I was outside for, I don't know, maybe an hour grading papers over on Saturday, and now my arms are all burned and my face is Can't sense it. But I know, that's one of the sins of being white is you turn red. Your skin turns red because you have no melanin. Those of you with natural melanin, you can be happy that you don't have to worry about sunburn. Of course, you really do need to worry about sunburn. You guys burn just like, not as bad as I do, of course, but you still burn. Not this bad, not that bad. And even African Americans, even black people that are very, very dark, they still sunburn. And they will tell you, yeah, I can't spend that much time outdoors. I'm sorry?
So how do you know if it's, if you get sunburn?
How do you know if you get sun? I mean, if you're black, oh, your skin burns. And it swells up.
Because yours turns red.
Oh, it
The
does?
color turns red.
Oh, theirs just turns darker?
Darker.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because almost all races of people, they want to be as pale as they possibly can be. It's really kind of odd. The Japanese, even in the hottest weather, the Japanese women will wear gloves, they'll wear shirts all the way down here, they'll wear hats so that their faces are exposed. And if you see them without something on one part of their body, you'll see that they have different colors, they have different skin tone. If they don't wear gloves, their hands are darker than their arms are. If they don't wear sleeves, then their arms are darker than their shoulders are, these kinds of things. So just about all races will do that. The Chinese do that. They cover almost completely. The Japanese especially, the Japanese are really serious about it. They wear a bonnet that comes out like this far. So they'll wear this thing and they have it tied down, and it's hot outside. And they've got this thing tied on it, and they've got gloves on, and they've got the sleeves all the way down, and they've got long pants on, and you're wandering around in 98-degree weather, almost naked. But here are these Japanese women with all these clothes on. But it was the same way with Africa, with the African slaves before the Civil War, of course. They covered themselves as much as they possibly can, and they still do. I mean, I'm not slaves, but African Americans will still cover themselves as much as possible and laugh about it. I'm probably shooting this thing in the wrong direction. That's not too bad. There we go. Sorry, all of you in video land. Okay. So they'll cover themselves as much as possible. When I was at Ashford, I had a lot of students who were African American. They tease me about it, about the fact that I can't go outside without turning red. Of course, if you went for a track meet or whatever, and some of the individuals are out there, they'd be upfront about this as well. They can't get out in the sun. Nobody should actually be out in the sun that much. 40 to 50% of Americans who reach 65 develop skin cancer, and of course I've already developed skin cancer thrice. 3 times, and primarily it's from unprotected sunbathing. And it is. The older you get, the thinner your skin gets, and of course the more susceptible you are to sunburn. Ultraviolet B rays damage DNA. Of course, it doesn't damage. It's not like it's going to damage your reproductive capability. It's just going to damage the DNA of your skin. And causes 90% of the skin cancers. Many researchers believe that the frequency of sunburns in childhood may lead to skin cancer and even melanoma. So what I did to myself when I was a child is what's getting me now, is what is punishing me now. Of course, when I was working on the farm, I would drive the tractor. I would be disking or plowing or hoeing or whatever I was doing. And I was out on the tractor all day long. And of course I turned brown as a nut in the summertime because I was out on the tractor all the time. With as little clothes on as possible because it's dusty and hot and a lot of fun in the summertime. I can remember the worst sunburn I ever got when I was working on the tractor wasn't when it was a sunny day and I was covered up. Or it wasn't covered up. It was when it was on a cloudy day, cold cloudy day, and I burned this part of my body, this part of my neck and my nose, and it blistered. I blistered my nose from that Yeah, I know, that was really kind of strange. It was kind of stupid. Back then, of course, there wasn't any sunscreen. They didn't know what sunscreen was, so there you go. This is what a melanoma looks like. Melanoma is a potentially deadly form of cancer that strikes the melanin-containing cells of the skin. Factors that may lead to an increase in melanoma is a thinning of the ozone layer protecting the Earth from UV radiation. We may see more melanoma, increased sun tanning and use of tanning booths. We're seeing more melanoma down in the tip of South Africa and the tip of South America because the ozone layer is the thinnest in those two areas. So we're seeing a lot more melanoma in those areas. So if you decide that if you make $1 million or a couple $1 billion and you decide you want to go on vacation, don't go to the beaches of South Africa or South America, because there aren't any beaches in South America, but there are in South Africa. So just don't go there because the ozone layer is so thin in those areas. Those with the deepest tans are the least knowledgeable about skin cancer. They're more relaxed. They are more sensitive to the influence of peers who value a good tan. You may think it seems kind of stupid for all these white people to be turning as brown as they possibly could be, but as far as white people are concerned, it makes them look healthy, and that's why they do it. So they want to look like you. They want to look like they get a nice tan. So they're jealous. Yeah, sure they're jealous. Tends to take, these individuals tend to take other health risks. They're more focused on their appearance than anything else. It's better to look good than to feel good, as an old comedian used to say. Immunocompetence is the overall ability of the immune system at any given time to defend the body against the harmful effects of foreign agents. It has to do, psychoneuroimmunology is something that I've studied in psychology. It's really kind of fun. It has to do with your overall health, the nature of the life-threatening disease or foreign agent, and the perceived stress that you are under. The immune surveillance theory is the theory that the cells of the immune system play a monitoring function in searching for and destroying abnormal cells. And when we're talking about abnormal cells, we're primarily talking about cancers. We all have abnormal cells growing in our bodies all the time. You, me, and everybody. But if your immune system is strong enough, you don't have to worry about it because your immune system will take care of it. It's when you come under stress that we may potentially have a problem. The global immunosuppression model is an early theory that proposed that stress always suppresses immune responses. For the chronically stressed individual, this model purported that these individuals were more susceptible to infectious diseases and cancers. The biphasic model proposes that only the most chronic stressors cause global immunosuppression. Short-term stressors may have no clinical significance. So potentially I should be really stressed out right now. I just learned that my wife, this summer, my wife is going to have both of her hips replaced. Ouch. So I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to have a fun summer, as you can imagine. Oh boy, what do I have to look forward to? Last summer, she had to go down to Florida to help my daughter break out of the state. This summer, it looks like she's going to be in a hospital bed all summer, as much fun as that sounds. So this should be very stressful for me. I should catch a cold. I don't know what's going to happen next. Maybe I'll develop a skin cancer. If I'm lucky, I don't know what should happen next. Because we're going to have to buy a new car. The car that we have right now is blowing our hips up, so we're going to have to get a new car, which is okay. We got the money. We're okay. Especially if they pay me my bonus. My goodness. Childhood adversity has been associated with greater emotional and physiological sensitivity to stress. So you guys need to watch me, okay? You need to watch and see if I start catching colds or something else happens, or if I'm grouchy. Okay, and if I am grouchy, you know what the hell the problem is. The problem is I'm worried about my wife. She's going to have to have each hip done one at a time. Sometimes they do both of them, but it's so debilitating that sometimes people don't survive. Really, it's really kind of it's going to be interesting to watch. If it were me getting my hips replaced, I wouldn't worry about it. But her family doesn't seem to live as long as my family does, by about 2 decades. My family lives into their 90s, sometimes into their 100s. But hers, if they make it into their 70s, they get a long way. And she's 66, so we'll see what happens. If you break your hip, half the people that break their hip die within a year. So I'm sure that the recovery rate for people with hip replacement surgery is a lot higher than that. But we'll see what happens. So you guys keep an eye on me to see if I develop any kind of strange things. I've started running again, so I know I ran twice. Saturday I ran twice. I know. Yeah, you guys run all the time. I haven't been able to run up here but what I figured out was that I was trying to run instead of jog. I just need to jog. If you jog, you'll be okay. I'm running with the dog, so that's a lot of fun. Unless there's another dog around, and then she tries to play with him, So I'm running, she's pulling the other direction. Childhood adversity has been associated with greater emotional and physiological sensitivity to stress, more difficulty dealing with additional adulthood stress, more pronounced cortisol and autonomic stress response, disrupted cellular immune function and immune system dysregulation. What am I talking about here? What we discovered looking at the people suffering from PTSD in Vietnam was that these individuals, the ones that suffered from the worst PTSD, were the ones that had suffered a childhood trauma. So if they had already created that cortisol loop in their brains, where their reaction was negative to any kind of stress, these individuals tended to deal with stress in a combat situation, which is as much stress as you can possibly imagine. These individuals handled it worse than individuals who had never suffered a childhood trauma. If you have never suffered a childhood trauma, then you can handle intellectually, you can handle the trauma as an adult would handle it. But these individuals who had suffered trauma as children, they were handling the stress from combat as if with a brain that was using immature logic. And of course, these are the individuals that suffered when they came back, more than individuals who had never suffered trauma before. And this is something that we recognize from Vietnam, or from combat. Now that we have the Gulf War to look at, we're seeing exactly the same thing. Signs are signals that can be seen by others. Symptoms are signals that are felt or noticed by someone who has them. The signs and symptoms of cancer depend on where the cancer is, its size, and whether it has metastasized. Having one or more of these symptoms doesn't necessarily mean that they have a cancer, but if a symptom has lasted for a long time or is getting worse, you should see your doctor. So this is something that we need to watch for. I had symptoms of something happening to me last week. It's gone now, and I realized that it was just a momentary stress-related situation. But I had symptoms last week, and I was thinking about it because, well, I've seen this stuff over and over and over again. Of course, my heart attack took me 2 days to figure out what the hell it was. So anytime you see anything strange, anything changes on your body, you need to be aware of it. You need to keep an eye on it. You've got a place on your skin that seems to be getting bigger, starting to elevate. Then you need to pay attention to this. You need to make sure it's not something. Maybe go to the doctor next week if it persists. Give it a week. If you have unusual weight loss, this is not normal. I weighed myself this weekend. I weighed 182. I'm back up to 185, so don't worry. It's not like I'm having weight loss. It was the fact that I lost so much water while I was running. Fever, if you have a fever, fevers are never normal. Fever means something's wrong. If you have a prolonged fever, you need to do something about it. You need to go see a doctor, figure out what the hell's going on. Unexplained fatigue. Of course, we get tired every day when we work. I know you've got papers to write and you're pissed off at Bradley for giving you all this shit to do, my God. And you're tired, you know, and you're using that as an excuse not to write your paper. And that's okay. But if there is no reason, if Bradway isn't in your life and you don't have to worry about writing a paper, and you're still tired, you're just tired every night, and you can feel it. It's bone weariness. If you've got that problem, then you need to do something about it. You need to pay attention to it. If you've got pain any place, pain means something's wrong. Pain isn't normal. It's not natural. I was walking up the stairs and I got a pain in my right knee. Wait a minute, my right knee's my good knee. That's not good. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. I was getting pain while I was running this weekend. Yellow, red, or darkened skin, however, and of course when I was telling you that African Americans, they have problems with their skin as well, and it's the fact that that they look different. I had a friend who was African American, a relatively dark complexioned individual. He came into work one day and I told him, you know, you look pale. And he just laughed. He thought that was the funniest thing in the world. And I said, no, you really look pale. And he said, how can you tell? And of course there are ways of telling. You can look at people's fingernails, you can look at their gums, you can look at a lot of different areas of their body, but his skin was pale. And it turned out, and he started vomiting, but later on that day he had the flu. And he looked pale. And when he came back from taking a couple of days off, he said, how did you know? You must know me really well in order to be able to tell that. Well, geez, you know, people look pale, they look pale. Anyway, whether you're African American or not. Pain or other changes in bladder or bowel habits, and of course this is what was happening to me last week. All of these things were changing. It's not that I had pain, it's that I had a change in bladder or bowel habits. And I got a little bit worried. I'm okay now, so don't worry about it. Sores that won't heal, of course. This may mean that you've got diabetes. But if you've got a sore and you don't have diabetes and it still won't heal, you got a problem. That means you've got a circulation problem. White spots on your tongue or the inside of your mouth. That could be cancer. That could be pre-cancer if you dip snuff or smoke tobacco. It really changes the inside of your mouth. Of course, Freud was a big smoker of cigars. And when he was within the last 5 years of his life, he had to have his bottom jaw taken out because it was cancerous. So he had a prosthesis that he put in his jaw. And the amazing thing was that he was able to speak just as well with a prosthesis as his bottom jaw as he did with his real jaw. But he had cancer. Unusual bleeding, of course. Bleeding is not normal anywhere. You're not supposed to really leak. If you're a female, of course, it's not really leaking. It is your menstrual period, but if you've got bleeding anywhere, you need to pay attention to it. Any lumps in the breasts or other parts of your body, lumps are not normal. Lumps we're supposed to be relatively smooth. So if you've got lumps, you need to look at it and figure out whether it's something good or something bad. Indigestion or difficulty swallowing, especially difficulty swallowing. The indigestion part, as I told you before, when I had my heart attack, it felt like indigestion, and it felt like pressure underneath my clavicle. Any noticeable changes in a wart or mole, especially if the paler you are, the more likely that you're going to have these problems. I have a wart on my elbow that I have to have my doctor looked at. Do you want a mole removed? The answer is probably not. Leave it alone. As long as it's not growing, as long as it's not raising, then leave it alone. Just leave it alone. If you look at actors and actresses at their not naked bodies, but at their exposed skin, a lot of them have moles. Why in the world didn't they just have those things taken off? Well, it's not really safe to take off a mole. Leave it alone. Just leave it alone. You can cause yourself a lot of heartache if you take off a mole. I had a neighbor that had this huge mole on her shin, and she decided she was going to take it off. Well, she didn't want to go to the doctor, so she just kind of scratched it off. She died of cancer about a year and a half later. It wasn't really a melanoma, but there was cancer involved with that mole, and she just needed to leave the damn thing alone. But she didn't. She scratched it off, and then she died of cancer because it metastasized. Any noticeable change? Okay. Persistent cough that won't go away. Of course, you need to take care of it. It can be lung cancer, whether you smoke or not. If you've got a cough and it won't go away, it's either bronchitis or it may potentially be lung cancer. My wife used to work at Sweet Medical Center in Chinook, Montana, and they had an IT guy, and he was the nicest guy in the world, sweetest fellow in the world, and he would, he'd come out if they had something at 6 o'clock in the evening, he'd come running out and take care of everything, right? And he hardly charged them anything at all. Anyway, he developed a persistent cough. And this guy didn't smoke, didn't dip snuff, he didn't do any of that stuff. And it turned out to be cancer. He died of lung cancer, despite the fact that he had never smoked. It's always possible. Early detection can dramatically improve a person's chances of survival. Detecting breast and testicular cancer can be done with breast testicular self-examination. In other words, grab yourself and squeeze it and see if there's any lumps in there. Anything hard is not right, okay? You should know what your testicles feel like if you're a male. You should know what your breasts feel like if you're a female. You need to test them from time to time in order to determine whether you have a tumor or a lump. If you have a lump, then it may potentially just be a blocked duct, but it also could be a cancerous growth. And so that's one of the things that you need to do. You need to check yourself. Self-examination is a source of detection of majority of tumors in these organs. There are individuals who don't want to touch themselves, and they may potentially nothing will happen to them, so who cares? But potentially they may die of a cancer because they haven't detected the tumor. And by the time they find it, because it starts hurting, by that time they're already dead. They might as well just dig the grave, jump in the coffin. It's going to take a couple of minutes. Okay, but the whole point is, just check yourself. By golly, if you can't check yourself, and if you're that nervous about the way you look or the way you feel, then you got a big problem. Clinical breast exams should be done every 3 years for women between 20 and 40, and annually after 40. What were they doing? What will they crush your breast? X-ray. What is that thing called? Oh, it's horrible. My wife is full figure, and they just crush her poor breast. I feel sorry for her every time they do it. What do they call that? I'm sorry? Mammogram. Thank you, mammogram. Now we know that mammograms aren't that good. Self-examination is more. You're more likely to find something with a self-examination. Mammograms, they've been using them for like 30, 40 years, but now they say that they're not that accurate. 30 to 50% of people who develop cancer wait 3 to 4 months before seeking medical attention. 3 to 4 months may mean metastasis, that the cancer will metastasize and then you're dead. So if you have something abnormal, you need to deal with it, okay? Don't be embarrassed. If you're a guy, all guys have testicles. If you're a female, all females have breasts. Just check them out, make sure everything's okay. For people with a family history of cancer, genetic screening can assist in early detection. This gives the individual the option to have preemptive surgery to remove the organ that is susceptible to cancer, but this also raises ethical issues. Doctors will not cut out healthy tissue. They don't want to do that. So if you've got an organ that is susceptible to cancer, but it hasn't developed cancer yet, the probability of finding a doctor that will cut it out is not that high. But we're changing the protocols. The protocols have been changing over time. Armed with the knowledge, should a responsible physician treat a child or even a young adult as if the problem is inevitable? In other words, we've got a 13-year-old girl and she has a family history of breast cancer, should we remove her breasts? Should we give her a double mastectomy? What should we do? Or a 21-year-old female who has a family history of breast cancer. Should we remove that healthy tissue? That's the question. If gallbladder disease runs in your family, should we take out your gallbladder, even though there's nothing wrong with your gallbladder? Should we wait until the cancer forms? And if we do that, you might die of the cancer.
I have a question.
Yes.
I had no gallbladder removed because it was a hurricane, they said.
Okay. Did you have gallstones?
No.
You didn't, was it gangrenous? But it wasn't working. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So then, I don't know why they
Okay.
did that.
Oh, the doctor decided to do that, and you agreed, yeah, go ahead and take it out because it's not doing anything, so go ahead and take it out. Okay. Because it wasn't functioning. So there was a problem. It wasn't doing. Okay. So there's no ethical issue there. It's like having a chunk of skin that isn't supposed to be there, just taking it out. Because it wasn't functioning, right? When we did abdominal surgeries, we always took out somebody's appendix. If we went in there, we took it out. It doesn't do anything. It can get infected. You have appendicitis. So if we chopped into somebody's gut, we always took out their appendix. Does that make sense, doesn't it? That way they won't ever have to worry about appendicitis. Does that make sense? Okay. When he went in to do orthoscopic surgery on my knee, to cut out all that meniscus that was messed up, he cut out all the meniscus, but he also chopped off what was left of my ACL. Because it wasn't attached, it was detached. And he said, didn't you know your ACL wasn't attached? I said, no. I'd never hurt my knee, it was just not attached. And that was, geez, when was it? That was 2005. So I haven't had an ACL, well, I didn't have an ACL before, I didn't even know it. The only problem I have now is that sometimes if I step in a hole and my toe is on a solid surface and my heel isn't, it feels like my knee's been hit. That's another problem. I know it hurts like that. And it's scary. It's scary. My knee doesn't bend backwards, or I guess it would. It feels like it's going to mess up. Okay. So should we do that? If we knew that your family history was that you have a cancer, should we cut that organ out before it develops cancer? Because it may kill you. Okay. Angelina Jolie has had a double mastectomy, a double radical mastectomy. Radical mastectomy is where they go into your lymph nodes and take out your lymph nodes underneath your armpits. You've got lymph nodes there. And she's had radical mastectomies where both of her breasts have been taken off, and she's had those lymph nodes taken off. And she's had a hysterectomy where her ovaries were taken out along with her uterus. She had the twins first, I guess. Yeah, so she's had all this stuff done. And the reason is, this is the reason why. If we look at her family history, we've got her second cousin had breast cancer and died in her 40s. This is her great aunt. She had breast cancer and a double mastectomy, and she died in her 70s. This is her grandfather. He had cancer of the sweat glands. Who has cancer of the sweat glands? And he died at age 61. This is her aunt, Debbie, had breast cancer, died at 61. This is her cousin, her uncle, had prostate cancer, died in his 50s, and her mother died of ovarian cancer at 56. And there is a gene that tells you whether you're more susceptible to breast cancer, and she has that gene. So Angelina Jolie, after she had her babies, decided she would have all of her plumbing taken out. Just in case, because she wanted to live to take care of her children. I guess she's got 6. I think she's got 6. 2 of them are hers, and she adopted 4 or something. Now she and Brad are. And then Alex said yes. Yes. Why, he yelled at one of the kids? Is that what? I have no idea. I never read that stuff. Anyway, look at all the people in her family with breast cancer. And those are all pretty close to her. I mean, her mother died at 56. Her aunts, she had great aunts. She had an uncle. Her grandfather died of sweat gland cancer at 61. Jiminy Christmas. Anyway, okay, and that's why she had all these body parts chopped out. And I don't think she had it done in the United States. I think she had it done in France. Every country has their own rules and their own laws. So, as far as medicine is concerned. So, I guess they were more willing to do it than anybody else. Surgery, diagnostic surgery is surgery to obtain a tissue sample that can be tested for cancer. Sometimes we call these biopsies. They'll go in. That's what happened with my second wife. She had a lump in her breast, and they went in and they did what they call a needle biopsy, where they stuck it into the lump and they drew out some fluid. I don't know. It sounds horrible, doesn't it? They don't even knock it out for it. They just do it. Anyway, and they looked at the cells. They pulled out some cells, and they looked at it and determined it wasn't cancer. Preventive surgery is used to remove a benign growth that might become malignant. That's what happened with Angelina Jolie. She had preventive surgery to remove organs that genetics indicated to her might easily become cancerous in the future. So she had she had a hysterectomy and she had a double mastectomy. Staging surgery is used to determine the extent of a disease. Laparoscopy can be done to gauge the degree of malignant growth and to take tissue samples. In my case, I had a ruptured spleen, but they weren't exactly sure what was going on in there. So they did an exploratory laparoscopy. Well, actually it was a laparotomy, where they just cut me from my kidney to my sternum. They just opened everything up and they went in there to figure out what was going on. And what they discovered was a ruptured spleen. A ruptured spleen and nothing else. I thought maybe they took my appendix out. I'm not exactly sure. They didn't tell me. But all they found was a ruptured spleen. So they took out the blood clots. A spleen is like a really spongy organ. And this thing exploded when the guy hit me. And there wasn't, if you leave a piece of the spleen intact, then it will grow a new spleen. But there wasn't enough of my spleen left to do that, so they just pulled everything out. It wasn't that much, a lot of blood, actually. Anyway, so that's kind of staging surgery. Curative surgery involves the removal of a tumor. That's what happened with the cancer on my forehead. They just chopped it out. It sounded like chopping with an axe, but no, it was with a scalpel. Restorative surgery is used to reconstruct a person's appearance or the function of an organ or body part, and that's restorative surgery. And we see that if somebody is in an automobile accident or if they're damaged in some way, they can do restorative surgery to build that part back up. Cancer surgery is associated with higher levels of distress and slower rates of emotional recovery than other surgeries. 60% of cancer patients will have some form of surgery, so they usually try to get to it if they can. I had a friend with a tumor in the middle of his brain, and they couldn't get to it. They were afraid that they would destroy his intellect, so they just left it. Normally, if there is any kind of surgery, they will go in and try to put it out as best they can. That's what they did with my sister. She had endometrial cancer. They went in and did a hysterectomy. And when they were in there, they tried to take out as much as they possibly could. but they couldn't get it all, and she died. Eventually, she died of endometrial cancer. You can imagine how distressing all of these things are. Your immune system is supposed to fight all of these problems, and if it doesn't fight all these problems, now we got a problem. What time is it?
2:40.
I'm sorry?
2:40.
2:40, and we stop at
2:50.
Oh, it's up at 2:30. I was going to do this thing, and I forgot all about it. How many people haven't taken this survey yet? This survey.
For this class or for?
Well, there are a bunch of classes that have taken this thing. So nobody's taken this? We'll do it next. We'll do it on Thursday.
I took it in Sue's class. Is it the,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like
you
a,
don't
it
have
looks
to
like
take
a AIDS testing or something?
Exactly. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it twice. So there's three of you. Probably Johnny hasn't taken it either. Okay. Johnny's taking it. You can take yours. You don't have to take it if you don't want to. It's a survey. What is it all about?
It's kind of long.
Yeah, it takes about
You
30.
kind of like evaluations of the school, the program, or what program you're in, what grade.
So it's completely voluntary. But you did it in Sue's class, so you're okay. So we'll do this on Wednesday. I forgot. Anyway, so cancer, you can imagine cancer surgery is really devastating to the individual because this is telling them that their immune system is not strong enough to fight off this cancer. That's a probability of them developing another cancer. But that's always there. Not only that, but pieces have to be taken out. Chunks have to be removed. If the cancer is in your lung, John Wayne had lung cancer, and they chopped out they took out one lung completely and a third of the other. And so he only had 2/3 of one lung capacity. And after that, he made the movie True Grit. But of course, that was about the last thing that he did. He had a hard time projecting his voice after that, so they had to put a microphone really close to his head in order just to hear his voice. But it was devastating for him because he was this masculine guy, and here he'd had most of his lungs taken out. Chemotherapy is when medicines are used to treat cancer. Chemotherapy can destroy cancer cells that have metastasized. If something hasn't metastasized yet, if you've got it localized into a tumor, then potentially you can go in and cut that tumor out and not have to worry about it anymore because it hasn't metastasized. If you can't operate on it, you can still build up the individual's immune system and potentially it can knock out the cancer. And so we try to do that. We try not to devastate the individual as much as we possibly can. But if it's metastasized, your immune system will not work on the cancer. So what we have to do is we have to kill the cancer in one way or another. And one way that we can do that is through chemotherapy. One of the reasons that we use chemotherapy is because the individual didn't come in soon enough and their cancer has metastasized. And this is the reason why you need to keep an eye on everything in your body, all the functions of your body, because you can have cancer anywhere. And if we can catch it fast enough, you won't have to have chemotherapy or radiation or any of the other really devastating things. Once it metastasized, your probability of recovering from the cancer is cut by quite a bit, by a large percentage. So you need to be aware of your body and you need to be monitoring yourself at all times. Chemotherapy can be used to cure the cancer, of course. It can kill it completely to keep the cancer from spreading farther. Usually if it spreads into your brain and you get a brain tumor, now that's a death sentence. Or lung cancer. Lung cancer is really hard to treat. We can use it to slow the cancer's growth, to kill cancer that has spread to other parts of your body, to relieve symptoms caused by the cancer, and that is why we use chemotherapy. Immunotherapy is a type of chemotherapy where the person's own immune system is enhanced to selectively target the cancer cells. This only works with non-metastasized cancer. Once it metastasizes, then our bodies don't recognize it as an alien structure. And hence we Our immune system is not trying to knock it out. Anti-cancer drugs are made to kill fast-growing cancer cells, but this can also affect fast-growing cells in the body, like your blood cells. In other words, it can give you leukemia. Cells in the digestive tract, it can mess up your ability to digest food. Cells in the reproductive system, it may make you impotent. And your hair follicles. And this is one of the reasons why when we use immunotherapy or chemotherapy, people's hair falls out. The side effects of chemotherapy: nausea and vomiting, of course, hair loss, fatigue, mouth sores are horrible. They're just the most god-awful things you've ever seen. Bleeding, infection, and anemia, of course, because it's killing blood cells. Anticipation of the side effects are sometimes worse than the side effects themselves. Thinking that it's going to happen, knowing that it's going to happen, sometimes can make the person very, very depressed. Cancer tends to make people extremely depressed. So should we give them antidepressants? Prozac, Zola? No, it's not a really good idea. So there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah, I know. Exactly. There's not a whole lot we can do about it. Because if we give them the Prozac, it may react with really other medications. And we certainly don't want to do that. We might cause the individual to suffer even more. Radiation is used to kill or damage fast-growing cancer cells with X-rays, gamma rays, alpha particles, or beta particles. I told you I had a friend that had a brain tumor right in the middle of his brain, and they couldn't operate on it, and they didn't want to use chemotherapy because he was only 14 years old. So what they did was radiation, and so they tried to cook the tumor out of his brain. Well, unfortunately, they hit his hypothalamus as well. So it not only knocked out the tumor, but it also knocked out his hypothalamus, killed his hypothalamus. I know. So he has to take all these medications to replace all that. I know, it's a mess. They also had to take out a chunk of his skull in order for the radiation to work. So they removed a piece of his skull. Then they put it back, and they tried to grow it, and it didn't work. They tried to maintain it, and it didn't work. So they tried a cadaver, a piece of skull from a cadaver, it didn't work. So now he's got this steel plate on the top of his head. I know. Radiation usually knocks out the cancer, but normal cells that are affected tend to grow back. How stupid is this guy? He just got his PhD in athletic maintenance or something really weird. He wants to own the Los Angeles Dodgers. As far as I'm concerned, he can have them. They beat the Giants yesterday 2-1. Bastards. What are we doing? Okay, about half of cancer patients receive radiation therapy every year. That's about 350,000 people. It is the primary treatment for tumors of the neck, for tumors of the head, early stage Hodgkin's disease, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancers of the lung, cancers of the breast, the cervix, the prostate, testes, bladder, thyroid, and brain. We can use radiation. Anything that's relatively close. And of course we had to use it on his brain because there was nothing else we could do. He's only 14 years old. This is a success story because not only did he recover from the cancer, but he also played college baseball at Kansas State. He was first baseman at Kansas State. And he has a PhD now, so obviously it didn't destroy him completely. His brain tumor that he developed at age 14. He was, unfortunately, he went to, where was that? Loma Linda, California. Loma Linda is a Seventh-day Adventist hospital. Huge hospital. Seventh-day Adventist. You know anything about the Seventh-day Adventist? Or vegetarian? There's not a first piece of meat in the whole hospital. So he comes out of surgery, and guess what he had to eat? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Broccoli, I think is what it was. And he hates broccoli. Anyway, he said the best day of his life was after they let him out of the hospital and they went and ate pizza. Because they don't eat cheese. The best day of his life was the day he ate pizza. Now he eats the biggest bunch of crap you can possibly imagine. He's such a weird guy. Side effects of radiation therapy, temporary hair loss. Sometimes it's permanent, fatigue, loss of appetite, skin rash, loss of white cells. They use chemotherapy on my sister. They also use radiation therapy on my sister. And of course, neither of them took. And she died. People try alternative therapies to arrest or cure their cancers. Aromatherapy, they burn all these stinky candles. Biofeedback, meditation, music therapy, prayer and other spiritual practices, yoga, tai chi, art therapy, massage therapy, herbal treatments. Lots and lots of alternative ways to cure yourself. Why don't we stop right here? We'll pick this up next time. We'll pick this up next time, right here, Coping with Cancer.